lecture in dactyloscopy. So, dactyloscopy. So first, fingerprint. Fingerprint is a ridge outline which appears in the end or bulb of our fingers. Then next is importance of fingerprints. Importance of fingerprints are for identification of the suspect in the purpose of investigation. Then next is to provide the identification of a dead person if there is a dead person inside the body of the crime. Then next is the identification of a missing person. So identification of a missing person, fingerprint is one of the only unique and most reliable thing to identify a person. Then next is detecting criminal identity through fingerprints collected in the scene and determining the recidivism or habitual delinquency. Habitual delinquency are delinquency that happen to a person, he does it repeatedly. Then next is fingerprint has the purpose of issuing clearance, so police clearance nowadays. Then next is fingerprint. Fingerprint is then next is dactyloscopy. Dactyloscopy is a science which deals with the fingerprint as a medium or as a means of personal identification. So there are two Greek words that composes the dactyloscopy. Dactyl, which means our fingers, then scopian, which means to examine. Then next is the next to dactyloscopy is the dactylography. Dactylography is the study of the fingerprint for the purpose of identification. Then next to that is dactylomancy. Dactylomancy, an attempt at the character, reading the pattern of the fingers. Then next is dermatoglyphics. Dermatoglyphics are lines or tracing ends in the skin of the fingers, palms and soles. Then polydactyl. Polydactyl is having some more than required number of fingers. So the normal fingers are 10. When a person has a polydactyl, he or she might have 11 fingers or more than 11. Then Chinese are the one to be the first users of fingerprint. They use fingerprint as a symbolism and for early practice for their rituals. Then next is Emperor Tenshin He. Emperor Tenshin He is the first Chinese ruler who devised a C carve from white plain jade. On the side of it, it has the name of the owner, and while the other side is the place for the thumb mark of the person. Then next is personality in the discovery of fingerprint. So Professor Marcelo Malpichi, known as the father of dactyloscopy according to Edwin Locard. Then he was noted the discovery of the inner and outer structure of the skin, the dermis and the epidermis. Dermis is the inner layer of the skin, while the epidermis is the outer layer of the skin. The next personality is J.C.A. Mayer. So he published a book which an atlas of anatomical illustration of fingerprints. So the next person is John Evangelist Perkinje. John Evangelist Perkinje is known as the father of dactyloscopy. Then he is a professor of anatomy at the Breslau University. Then he published and discussing the nine patterns of fingerprints. Then next to him is Sir William James Herschel. So William James Herschel is known as the father of gyroscopy. Then next is Hermann Welker. So Hermann Welker is he took his own fingerprints and he preserved it within 41 years. Then after 41 years, he discovered that the fingerprint doesn't change, but rather it has some altercation like scratches due to old age. Then prove that fingerprint doesn't change, but it has altercation due to old age like scratches. So three allied sciences according to the scope of dactyloscopy. First is gyroscopy. Gyroscopy is a scientific examination of palm and hand. So palm and hand words. There are words. The Greek words are chair, which means palm or hand. Then scopian, which means as examine. So next is podoscopy. Podoscopy, it is the examination of the sole of the foot. Then podo, which means foot, and scopian, which means examine. Then next is poroscopy. Poroscopy is nabanggit ko kanina, wherein poroscopy is a scientific examination of sweat pores or glands. Sweat pores or glands, these are the glands where our sweat excretes or lumalabas. Then Greek words is poro, which means peer, and scopian, which means examine. Then methods of identification of fingerprint nung wala pang science that is used. So before the science fingerprint was in use, they used tattoo marks, scar marks, and anthropometry. So anthropometry, alam naman natin na ito yung kay Alphonse Bertillon, wherein na ano yung identification ng tao sa bony parts ng kanyang structure ng kanyang katawan. So there are two principles in dactyloscopy. The principle of individuality, wherein no two person or have the same fingerprint. It has a ratio to 1 to 64 billion. Then next is principle of permanency or principle of constancy. So the fingerprint of the person which develop inside the mother's womb is never na magbabago throughout the life of the person. Then next is, let's talk about some tools in getting fingerprint in a crime scene. So fingerprint laboratory equipments are ink roller. So ink roller, it is designed to spread the ink to the ink plate. Then next is the ink stub or inking plate. So it refers to the material or metal or glass such as a 1/4 thing like that. 1/4 or thickness, 1/4 and thickness, and 6 more inches long, where fingerprint is distributed for fingerprinting. Then next is the camera holder. Camera holder, it is a gadget wherein use clipping the fingerprint card to avoid the movement of the card during printing. Card holder pala, hindi card holder. Then next is scissors. Scissors, instrument for cutting. Then next is the rubber glove. Then next is the rubber gloves, wherein it protects the fingers of the technician from leaving his own prints to the crime scene or object that is being examined. Then next is the post-mortem fingerprint. Post-mortem fingerprint equipment. It is a set of equipment consisting hypodermis syringe, spoon, tissue builder, solvent, and other taking prints from a dead person. So it talks about for a dead person, post-mortem fingerprint equipment. Then next is the fingerprint table. Fingerprint table, it is intended It is intended for taking fingerprints, then fingerprint pointers, fingerprint cameras, and forensic optical comparator. So, let's talk about naman sa fingerprint. So, fingerprint patterns, arch, loops, and whorl. So, arch has a percentage of 35%, loop has a percentage of 60%, and then the whorl has a percentage of 5%. So, let's talk about plain arch. What is plain arch? Plain arch is has a pattern in which ridge flows from one side to another without recurving, usually having a upward curve, and in the center making patterns like an arch. So, kaya siya natawag na plain arch ay nagpo-form siya ng arch sa center. Then next is the tented arch. Tented arch is a pattern wherein at the center forms a thrust or make a sufficient rise like pattern of a tent. So, kaya siya tinawag na tented arch. Then radial loop. Radial loop, it is a loop which downward slope or slanting ridges runs towards the direction of the finger. Then next is ulnar loop. Then we have radial loop and double loop whorl. So double loop whorl, a pattern consisting two separate distinct loop. Then ulnar loop naman is it has a formation of slope and slanting ridge. Slope and slanting ridge runs toward the direction of a little finger. Then accidental loop whorl. Accidental loop whorl, it has a pattern consisting a combination of two different types such as loops whorl or loop or central pocket loop whorl. Then next is what do we mean by edgeoscopy? Then edgeoscopy literally means as method of identification through the examination of unique details and characteristics found along the edges and individual fingerprint ridges. So that is edgeoscopy. That is my memorization about the lesson 2, dactyloscopy. That's all.